Hello,
Great.
Susan. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you here because you were able to resolve the biggest conundrum for people entering the Salesforce space, which is they're working very hard, they're getting this experience, they're doing trailheads, maybe doing some projects, but then no one wants to hire them. No one wants to
Mhm.
hire a fresher. The odds are against them. And there's a huge bias for people with experience. But you had a creative way to resolve that issue, and it's a way I haven't heard from anyone else. So that's why I'm so happy to talk to you, and would love for everyone to learn about how you did it and how they can use those techniques. So before we get into that, can you please tell me about yourself?
My name is Susan Lee, and I'm currently a Salesforce business analyst for a nonprofit called 4Block. We help veterans find meaningful and deserving careers through their transition out of the military.
Mhm.
I'm currently living in Germany with my active duty husband. He's in the army, and we moved here about 8 months ago, so it's still pretty new. And I'm a military spouse. I've been a military spouse for almost 3 years now. And it's still a very new lifestyle. And it's part of the reason why I pivoted my career to Salesforce.
How long ago did you decide to become a Salesforce professional?
I decided to pursue Salesforce November of 2018. I still remember because I got on Trailhead. Like most people, I got addicted to the badges and the challenges, and I became a ranger on Christmas Day. So it took about 8 weeks, and a month later, I took and passed the Salesforce admin certification. And actually, just like a couple days ago was my 1 year anniversary of my starting my Salesforce job. So it's been a year
Awesome,
now. Yeah.
awesome. Is your husband IT person? Do you come from an IT background? Why did you decide to become a Salesforce professional?
Yes, my husband definitely is not IT background. I was a teacher, actually. I was a high school math teacher in South Philadelphia for about 5 years. That's where I started my career. I decided at 10 years old I was going to be a teacher, and I did. I became a teacher. And then I got, quite honestly, a bit burned out, even though I loved the job. So I took a gap year and decided that, I still want to serve the community. So I decided to transition and shift to a slightly different industry. So I went to the nonprofit side. And that is when I first heard about Salesforce. I used it as an end user, and then I wanted to learn a little bit more, so I became a power user. But I never touched like the back end of it. But I've always been kind of interested in
Mm,
going more to the tech side. Since I had that math background, I've always been interested in tech, but I didn't want to code, right? So like most people, I assume like I don't want to learn how to code, so I figured tech wasn't really for me. And then, as I mentioned, I'm a military spouse, so after working at that nonprofit for a couple of years, and we were moved to our first duty station, which was in northern New York, called Fort Drum. And it's a very rural town, very small. And of course, I had to quit my job, which was in DC. And for the first year, I really struggled trying to find a job. And at first, I thought like, oh, I'll be fine. I'm professional. I have years of experience. I have a master's degree. I'll have no problem finding a job. But the problem was that because I was a military spouse, people there knew that we would move around frequently, and they didn't want to hire someone full time who was just going to leave in a couple of years. And I had that working against me. And so the first year, I did little things like consulting here and there. I traveled a little bit. I did a few projects in Costa Rica and the Bahamas. I love traveling, so I was trying to find a way to like bring that into my life a little bit more. But I could never find something stable. And I realized that I needed to find something that would allow me to work remotely, that I can take with me as we move around. And thank God I did, because now we're in Europe. But I also knew that I wanted to stay true to my purpose, which is to help people, equip them with the resources that they need to improve their lives. And so I started looking for any resource that I could take advantage of. And the military offers lots of career types of resources, especially to spouses and veterans. And one of them was Vetforce, now called Trailhead Military, which is Salesforce's career readiness program that's free for the military community. And at the time, I thought, why not? It's free. I've used it briefly as an end user, and I learned that it was all in the cloud, so this could be the answer to what I was looking for.
And what kind of support did VetForce provide you?
They offered like the free exams and classes, which were great, but I think the most valuable part of VetForce was the community. I think in general, the Salesforce, the Ohana has an amazing culture, right? Like you could talk to somebody from another country who is involved in Salesforce, and it's like you become family like really fast, right? There's just something about it, the Ohana, that's so powerful. Within VetForce, it was the same thing, but we banded together very quickly because we all understood the struggle that we were going through, the challenges that we were going through, especially as military spouses and veterans and active duty transitioning. It's a very unique experience that less than 1% of the American population ever experienced. So we knew the struggles, and so we helped each other, supported each other, and we continue to do so throughout the entire journey. In addition to that, I also had an opportunity to attend Trailhead DX last year, and they covered the cost of that, flying me out there and having me there and attend the entire event. So I don't think I could have done that with VetForce's support. So I'm really appreciative of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All those things you mentioned, especially the Trailhead DX, because I know how expensive it is.
Oh yeah. when we like added up how much like it costs for each of us to be out there, we're like, oh wow. So yeah, we were really grateful. And it was just, I think it also, it was a mix of us. There were people who were already in the ecosystem, people like me who were just starting off. And so being able to meet these other people who were in the same community, all kind of working towards the same goal, and it was just amazing. I mean, it's one thing to see it on the screen, right? But it's another when you're there in person.
How long did you spend learning Salesforce before you went for a job, before you started looking for a job?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I studied for about 2 months, got Ranger. So it took 3 months for me to get my certification. And then it took me another 3-4 months to get a job, to get a paying job. Mm-hmm. And during those 3-4 months, I was also working towards my project management professional, my PMP certification, which was a lot more involved than I thought it would be. So that took up a lot of my time. And in addition to that, I was interviewing and looking for a job. And it took, so it took a few months.
So you spent about 3-4 months looking for a job, and you were successful in finding a job, not even a regular job, but a remote job.
Yeah.
That's amazing to land the first Salesforce job and to be remote. I think it was an amazing coincidence of you showing your passion, maybe your background is a good fit, and but can you tell us about how did you manage to do that? Seems so amazing.
Yes, I'm happy to share that. Well, it was a combination of a lot of things, but I'll try to keep it specific and concise. So the very first thing was I made sure that what my brand was very clear, right? So I knew that by taking the approach of, I just want any job in Salesforce, just to get into the ecosystem wasn't going to be good enough, because there are hundreds and thousands of other people who are trying to do the same exact thing. And I knew that I needed to offer more than just the Salesforce skill set, which was still very new. And so I came up with my non-negotiables. I knew that I wanted to look for a Salesforce admin or a Salesforce business analyst type of role. I knew that it had to be remote. Like, I knew that it would be tough, but I couldn't give up that part of it, because I wasn't willing to restart every time we moved. And then the third part was that I wanted to make sure that the work that I do is aligned with my purpose, which again is to help people improve their lives. So it didn't mean that I have to work for a nonprofit or school, but it had to be with a company that had really strong values and had some type of social mission. And with that in mind, I also knew that where I was living, I wasn't going to have the opportunity to go to job fairs and things like that, to meet people in real life. And not to mention where I lived, it snows 9 months out of the year, so I was quite literally trapped in the house. And so I knew I had to really leverage the online platform. So thank God for LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an incredible resource to leverage. Like, once you learn how to use it, it can be so powerful. And so what I did is I started looking up articles on like how to use LinkedIn, how to boost my profile, but also I swore off applying for jobs online, like online job applications, because the research, you can look it up, the research shows that it doesn't work. Like, most of the time it just goes into some black hole and you barely ever hear back. And they said the key was always through networking. So I thought, well, I don't know anyone in the ecosystem and I'm new. How am I going to connect with someone and network with someone without any connections? And so I used LinkedIn. I started cold messaging people. So I would look up companies I was interested in or nonprofits I was interested in, and I started cold messaging people in like a Salesforce role. And I made sure my messages were very tailored. So I did all my homework, right? I did my due diligence and made sure I asked for a very like specific ask. People love talking about themselves. Like, I want to hear your story, but this is also what I would like to know. Could I have 15 minutes of your time? And 90% of the time, people responded back and said yes. Like, I don't think anyone's ever responded back saying no. And that like ask for an informational interview can really help you get your foot in through the door, and not promising an interview, like a real interview or a job or anything, but really trying to better understand, like, what is this industry? What is this ecosystem about? And how will I fit into it? And basically also letting the world know that you are looking for a job and you are trying to get into the ecosystem. Like, people don't know that. I think when we are thinking about it ourselves, we're kind of in our own heads and we forget that not everyone else knows like what's going on and like what our needs are. So I was doing all those things and I didn't really have like official mentors. I used, again, the resources that were offered to me, like American Corporate Partners, Hiring Our Heroes. It doesn't have to be military related, but any resource that's kind of career related. And I asked them for, they had volunteer mentors, and I told them, trying to get into Salesforce. Please connect me with someone who's familiar with Salesforce. And that's what they did. And I would connect with, that was a very easy way of connecting with someone. And I would talk to them, give them my pitch, tell them, hey, I'm looking for a Salesforce job. I know I'm an entry-level admin, but I'm not an entry-level professional, right? I've had years of experience as a professional. I've managed people. I've experienced leadership, project management, coaching, training, and this is how I can apply and transfer all those skills that I've built up over the last decade to this role as an admin, right? So that way they saw that my value and my brand was more than just newbie Salesforce admin. And that's how I made myself stand out. And in addition to that, I started showing up, like physically showing up to Salesforce events. So before Trailhead DX, I went to the Salesforce World Tour in Boston last spring. And Boston was about a 13-hour round trip from where I lived. But at the time, this was like, I think around April. So that was like the third month into me trying to find a job. And by the third month, you probably experienced this before, when 3 months now doesn't sound like a long time, but when you're like unemployed and every day trying to find a job and getting rejections over and over, like 3 months is a long time. And so at that point, I realized, like, what else can I possibly do to improve my chances here? Because I did feel like giving up at some point. Like I was wondering, like, am I foolish to be doing this? And one of my informal mentors said, you should look up if there's any community groups around you. There weren't, but are there any events happening near you? And so I decided to go to the world tour. I went by myself. I was way overdressed. I didn't realize like Salesforce was way more casual than a typical like corporate job. And I just talked to a bunch of people there I didn't know. And I also reached out on VetForce's community forum. I asked, is anyone going to be at this event? And the guy who ended up introducing me to my now boss was the one who responded. And he said, hey, I'll be there, let's meet up. So met up with him, and he was active duty transitioning out. And I told him my story. By then, like, my brand was clear, my story was clear, my pitch was clear. Basically, I treated every interaction like it was an interview. So I gave him, I told him all of that, I gave him the spiel. And he said, okay, like, I'll let you know if I hear anything. And about a week or so later, he messages me on LinkedIn, and he said, hey, the nonprofit that I'm volunteering for right now, they're looking to hire an admin in the next month, and I already have a job offer somewhere else. They're fully remote, and the founder is a veteran. Would you be interested in interviewing? And I was like, hell yeah, I am. And so I interviewed, and in the second interview with the founder, that's when we found out we were moving to Germany in the fall. And I told him, I said, so look, we're moving to Europe, but I still want this job. Like, I know I can do it. Like, our time difference isn't that bad. Like, I can figure it out. And he said, well, if you're willing to do it, then we're willing to give it a shot. So, which was amazing. Like, he took a chance on me, and this was the first, and I'm the only person not working in the US right now. But yeah, so the first couple of months I was in the US, I got acquainted with the organization. And then I've been working from Germany since October of this past year.
Wow, amazing story on so many different levels. This is like a guidebook of smart strategy, of using your experience to your advantage, like background, knowing what your non-negotiables are, using the community that you're part of, and persevering, and how your hard work through all this time helped you align the stars so that you found the Salesforce job that you can do remotely. If someone told me that they're looking for a remote job and it should be the first Salesforce job, I would think they're crazy. But you showed me that it's not crazy. It's possible if you're smart about it. If you work really hard for it. That's an amazing story.
Well, thank you. And I think I agree. Like, yeah, you have to work hard, but I had to really change my strategy completely, because as I mentioned, I went from being a teacher to a nonprofit, and that was still switching industries, and I was able to use the same tricks and tactics that I used before. But this time it was a totally different game, right? It was a new industry. I was trying to find a job remotely. And so I had to change my approach completely. And it was really difficult, but it absolutely paid off in the end.
So the best things you did, the smartest things you did, first is you used LinkedIn. You avoided applying to companies through their application websites, right? Because they get hundreds of emails, and like it's hard to stand out on a piece of paper. Right. When there are people who have more experience than you, maybe they have IT background, so that's not to your advantage. The third thing you did well is you reached out to people at companies for informational interviews. The fourth thing would be, what's the fourth thing would be? That you went to, it showed up to events, right? You went to Boston. You say 13 hours back and forth?
13 hours, yeah.
That's really far.
Yeah. It's because of the traffic too.
Traffic, but still, it's one day event, right?
Yeah, right. It's just one day, right?
Wow, 13 hours. Still, imagine driving 6.5 hours and showing up to an event.
Yeah, I spent one night there, but
It's still, even like I get tired
yeah,
after 3-4 hours of driving, and I'm like,
right,
I'm out for the day.
right, by myself. Yeah.
Oh, yourself too. Wow. And
Yeah.
then you really use the network yet. You kept talking to people.
Mhm.
You. I also really liked the way you worded things. You're you are Salesforce newbie, but not a you're experienced, professionally experienced. So it's
Mhm.
just a matter of time until your Salesforce knowledge catches up. And I really like that concise wording that you gave. I'm forgetting right now, but um, that was very nice way you put it.
One thing I would just emphasize a little bit more is, the way like just like you mentioned right now, like you like the way that I presented, right? Like I'm a Salesforce newbie, but I'm also a professional that brings all this other experience and value. That is something that I had to like train myself to say over and over again, right? Like I had different iterations of that statement because it wasn't just proving to the interviewers, because I knew they were going to think like, but you don't have a lot of experience, so why should we hire you, right? Why should we pay you that's more than an entry level admin? And so I had to not just convince them, but convince myself like that I deserve it. And so when people are going into these interviews, the interview questions are not going to be out of nowhere. Most interview questions are the same. And if you are going in as an inexperienced admin, but as an experienced professional in another industry, like be ready to tackle that question and make sure you have a really strong answer and that you're convincing and that you're convinced as well. So there's a lot of like your own emotional and mental exercises that you need to go through, because when you're transitioning to a new industry, you feel like an imposter sometimes and you're not sure if you can make it or that you deserve it. And I think that in the beginning, in the interviews that I was in, that I think the interviewers could sense that, and that's why they were like, well, if she's not really sure if she can handle it, then we're not sure either. So I don't blame them. And so I saw every interview opportunity as a way to practice for the one, right? Like the job that I'm really going to get.
We talked about the things you did well. Are there some things you think you did not do so well or would do different if you could go back?
Initially, I was not so humble. So initially, I thought, I don't need anyone to look at my resume, or I don't need to practice interviewing, or I don't really need to talk to other people. Like I can figure all this out on my own. And as I mentioned before, it took me a year of flailing, a year for me to finally even be open to the idea of trying something different and accepting help. And I only found out about VetForce because I started going on those military spouse career Facebook groups and signing up for emails through all the nonprofits I was helping military spouses. Like I wouldn't have known about it if I didn't like push my pride down and realize I needed help. And part of me wishes that I would have figured that out sooner. And so that way I didn't spend a year of like, I could have done this a year earlier. But at the same time, I think I needed to go through that. You know, I'm pretty stubborn. So I kind of need to learn the hard way that I don't know everything, and that it was a very humbling experience. And so if you're like me, who is a professional and you want to prove to everybody that you can do it on your own, but honestly, asking for help doesn't mean that that you're not as professional or you don't really know what you're doing. You're doing something that's really, really hard. Like trying to find a job in a new industry, and especially if you're trying to find a job remotely, it's really difficult. So it's one of those like it takes a village type of things, and that's my best advice to you. So if you're struggling and you haven't taken advantage of everything that's being offered to you, start doing it now.
Yet, I think it's more than takes a village. It takes a lot of perseverance and smarts, using everything at your disposal when a lot of things are against you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to pause on that about perseverance. Looking for a job for 3 months is very painful, especially in US, because your bills keep coming. Yeah, you have to pay for insurance, healthcare, and a lot of other things you didn't even know about. You have to pay constantly, and looking every day for a job is very difficult. And I remember when I was finishing up my master's degree, or even when I came to US when I moved to the US in 2011, when I was looking for a job was one of the most difficult periods of my life. It changed my perspective on some things. I thought, why don't people just find a job? Why? America is a country of opportunities. There's so many jobs. Unemployment is so low. So there must be something wrong with you. And so when I was in that situation, I was like, oh, is there something wrong with me? I cannot find a job. It's been 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I'm unemployed. But you went through it for 3 months and you kept going at it. You were positive. And so what kept you up? What kept you moving? What's your superpower?
Having the perseverance is a mental battle. So you have to, every time you get rejected, every time you go another day and you don't have a job, you need to reach out to those supports. So my husband is incredibly supportive and patient. He's also a psychiatrist, so he's used to listening to people all day. So, and I would reach out to my friends some of my friends who were also trying to break into the ecosystem, right? They were also struggling with the same things. And I reached out to those informal mentors. And like I said, I honestly called them up one day just to be like, am I crazy? Like, am I crazy to be doing this? Because am I ever going to find a job? And he said to me, like, Susan, I promise you will find a job, but you have to keep going. And I really needed to hear that. Of course, my husband was also saying the same things, but when somebody who isn't as close to you, who's in the ecosystem, who's on the other side that you're trying to get to, tells you there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but you just have to keep going, that can be really encouraging. And that, like you were saying, that breaking point of at the 3-month mark when I was like, I was starting to get a little shaky. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. That's when I went to the world tour, because I just need to switch things up, because everything was behind a screen. I was feeling really isolated. Just talking to people on the phone or on video wasn't enough. I need to just get out of my own head. I need to be around other people. So the timing was really good. And then the world tour happened. And then soon after that, I was talking to somebody in the VetForce community who was a Salesforce consultant. And I was asking for, like, what's your advice? Like, here's everything I'm doing, right? That's what I started doing. I would approach people who were in the ecosystem, who's willing to give me the time of the day. And I said, here's everything I've done. What am I missing? What else should I do? And then sometimes I would even ask them and say, like, do you think that I can do this? Do you think that what I'm asking for, a remote job with a social good company, do you think it's possible? And they would say yes. And they said that it is possible, but these are the things you need to do. Here are the things you need to consider. And that is what kept me going.
So what kept you going is the support of people in the Salesforce community who said, you can do it, keep doing it. And is that it?
Well, they gave me actionable items too.
Okay.
Right? So they told me, like, what else I needed to do. And so that one person, she's the one who told me about Trailhead DX. Mm-hmm. And she was going to be one of the people leading the VetForce group at Trailhead DX. And so she said, did you hear about Trailhead DX? And we're sponsoring, you had to interview for it, but we're sponsoring people in the VetForce community to come to the event. And I said, I heard about it, but Trailhead DX, it sounds like it's for developers, and I don't want to be a developer. And she said, well, yes, it could be for developers, but for VetForce community, like anyone, right, whatever you're interested in, it's really an opportunity for you to come see it to an event and meet the other people in the community. And so that's what I did. And so I applied, I got it. And then a month later, because I think Trailhead DX was early May, I went to Channel DX, and that re-energized me, right? That gave me that boost. So like the world tour gave me that boost of energy, and then Trailhead DX gave me that boost of energy. So I think that being able to not just talk to people and people just saying like keep going, but also saying here's what you need to do to like keep moving that needle forward a little bit more, right? To increase your chances. That is what, and a combination of like being able to meet other people and go to these events and see and hearing other people's stories. I think that was really important too, that
Also,
there is a way to do this, right? It's not, there isn't just one formula, one way to get into the ecosystem.
how many informal mentors did you have? Can you give us some numbers? Maybe how many jobs did you apply to? How many interviews you had? Do you, or maybe the other also interesting data you can give us?
Oh boy. Okay. Mentors, I would say informal mentors. I had three or four, and some of them were recommended by other mentors. So I would just keep being passed along. It's great. I probably had maybe 6 or 7 interviews with different like a mixture of companies. Like paying jobs and volunteer and internships, like a mixture of those. I had like, yeah, maybe 6 or 7 over those 3 or 4 months. Some of them went fairly far in, and some of them, it was only like the first interview. In terms of resources, like I signed up for, had to be at least 10, maybe more. Took advantage of a lot of things. And
So what do you mean by resources?
yeah, so, well, of course, Salesforce was one of them. And then the project, the PMP, I knew that I could, like, having the PMP would only make myself more marketable. And like with my goal being a Salesforce business analyst, having the PMP would look really good on my resume. So I also took advantage of the PMP, hiring our heroes, American corporate partners, paradigm switch. I mean, there was Candorful. They help specifically with interviews, like practice interviews, and not just practice interviews, but interviewing online. I thought like, oh, I know how to interview. I've been an interviewer. Like, I don't have anything to learn. Really humbling. And when I realized, no, I do. So I took advantage of it. I was like, why not? Maybe I'll learn something. And I did. Because you know how they say 80% of communication is nonverbal? I learned that there are a lot of nonverbal things that I do during an interview. It was incredibly eye-opening, and that just made me an even stronger candidate, like after I went through those practice interviews. So I realized as I was scaling up on those resources and like taking advantage of and soaking everything up, there was even a program I took. It was a paid one, but it was 6 to 10 weeks, and it was called How to Get a Virtual Job Without Applying Online in 10 Weeks. Like, that was the name of the course, and I was like, wow, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So yeah, I just took advantage of everything possible, and it had to be at least 10 of them.
What's the one that helped you prepare for online interviews? What's that website or resource?
Yeah, it's called Candorful. It's spelled Candorful. And so when you sign up, you get three practice interviews. It's free for people in the military, and you basically have a whole list of people who you can schedule a call with. So they connect with you and over Zoom and they practice. You send them a job description of what job you're trying to go for. So I sent them a Salesforce admin job description, and so during the interview at the very beginning, I just give them a brief synopsis of like who I am and what I'm looking for. And so they come up with interview questions, and they'll just start interviewing you, and so you pretend like it's a real interview. And then at the end, they give you some verbal feedback, and you get an email about a couple of days later with like written feedback with more details on like what's great and what you can work on. and you do about 3 of these. And so each interviewer, at first I was like, why do I have to do 3? That sounds like a lot. But I signed up with different interviewers, and I got 3 totally different types of feedback. It was so valuable.
Wow.
Yeah, because with all of them, and another thing is, right, earlier you were saying, like, why can't I get a job? Like, am I crazy? Like, am I just bad at interviewing? Am I coming across the wrong way? And all the interviewers were telling me that my interviews were strong, but where I still need to work on was my confidence, because in the beginning of the interview, when they said, tell me your story, like, what's your background? But as soon as they started asking questions about Salesforce, that's when I went from like here to like, oh, like I would like shrink up and my voice would get like quieter. And I didn't realize I was doing that until they pointed it out. And I was like, wow, like, even though I wasn't trying to come across that way, I was physically doing it. And so I had to practice like not doing that.
And these people, they were like IT people or from Candorful, or they were just HR people? What's their background?
They come from all types of backgrounds. So they're just all people who want to help other people with their interviewing skills. So they come from all different types of backgrounds. One of them was someone with an IT background, but he gave me one like IT related tip, but most of the feedback that he gave me was, again, the nonverbal. Like, one of the things that he said I was doing was that when I had to talk about my accomplishments, I'm not someone who likes to brag about like what I do. He said that he could tell that I'm like that because when I was talking about my accomplishments during the practice interview, he said I would blink really slow. And he said when people do that, it's their way of trying to like hide something, and which totally made sense because I wasn't comfortable with like talking about myself, like talking about what I'm like really good at and all the things I accomplished. So I try to kind of tone it down, and he said you shouldn't tone it down. Like, you need to lift that up, especially because you're trying to get a job in a new industry. So you need all the confidence and the accolades and everything that you can talk about and make yourself look great. Like, you have to do that.
This is wonderful advice you gave about appearing confident. I agree. It is hard to be confident when you have like 0 years of professional paid experience. And now I notice when I interview, and I'm pretty confident, and I can tell that my confidence is sometimes impresses people, and I can answer the technical questions, but when I can answer the question and appear confident, it gives me an edge. And the questions they ask are like a lot of for developer roles are a lot of admin questions, like just to make sure you know the admin stuff. And I think what differentiates people with experience versus with less experience is just the more experienced people just answer things confidently, and if you can answer things as newbie with confidence, I think it really helps you stand out. And it's really great that you got this feedback.
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you answer a question about how well you can perform in a role that you've never done, right? And so and I'll share this all with you, one of the tricks and the piece of feedback that they taught me at Candorful was the checkmark. So when you are asked a question like that, where you know that your confidence is going to be shaky, because they say like, oh, do you think you'll be a great Salesforce admin or something like that? But like, what have you done? Like, what has your experience been so far? And it's barely been anything. So the check mark is you start with acknowledging like, well, I haven't had as much experience yet, but then you jump to the parts that you're confident about. So the way I crafted my response was, so my experience has been an end user and a power user for a couple of years, and I've been on Trailhead and I'm a ranger, and these are the things that I've done. And I know that I have a lot to learn, but what I also bring is this years of experience working as a leader, as a manager, and all those skills that I have is something that I've gained over the years. It's not something you can just learn on Trailhead. You can't just do a module on leadership and now you're a leader, right? And so I said, like, I know I can do this job. I know that if I go on Trailhead, I take advantage of all the resources that are out there. I just need a little bit of time, but I can learn it. Like, but all the other years of experience that I brought with me, all the soft skills that I bring with me, that is something that only comes with experience, and I have it, and I can bring that to your organization. But it took me a long time to get to that answer, right? Because before, when they asked me, what's your Salesforce admin experience been like? And I would say, not a lot. They're like, okay, and that was the end of it. So you have to always bring it back to who you are, right? Like, you're not just hiring me to perform some tasks, like as an admin. You're hiring all of me, and I want to remind you who that is and what I bring.
Yeah, wonderful advice. And I also notice when you speak, it's so easy to follow your ideas. I think you're a very effective communicator.
Thank you. It helps with being a teacher.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But it definitely is so any of you teachers out there, educators out there who are trying to get into the ecosystem, I use that experience of training people, right? Of teaching people, because that's a huge part, especially so for me, I'm a business analyst for a nonprofit, right? I'm not a consultant that works with like many different organizations. So it was important for me to convey to my now boss and to the team that not only am I going to perform, be able to perform all these operational things for you, but also be able to have the team buy into the things that we're doing and the processes that we're implementing, because people don't really like change. And I've been on the other side where, I've been on the program side of things where like Salesforce and operations is just like on the back burner, right? It was like not as important, and so you just kind of do it when you have to do it. And whenever there was changes, it was kind of annoying because it's like, now I got to learn something new. Why do I have to do this? So I came from that side, and I bring that with me. And as someone who was a teacher and a trainer and a coach, I knew how to communicate and knew how to get the team to buy into these new changes. And I think that's what makes me so effective as a business analyst. I'm not the most skilled admin out there. I know I'm not. I still have a lot to learn. But when it comes to training people and communicating and being able to translate, right? Salesforce is a language, but running a nonprofit is its own language. Like, being the translator, I think is really important.
So Candorful was a wonderful advice. I think people, you will use it, take advantage of it. And then you mentioned VetForce. Which other ones would you highlight that were just awesome?
Well, so if you're a part of VetForce, be engaged on the forum. Like, put yourself out there, make a post, say, hey, I'm here, this is what I'm working on, this is where I'm trying to go, share your accomplishments, share where you're struggling, share when you fail. People need to hear that stuff. I feel like sometimes, especially on social media, we just share all the highlights of our lives, but we don't hear about, the third week into or the third month into trying to find a job and really struggling, and knowing that there are other people out there going through the same thing. I think we need to hear that and share that and know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we have to find other ways to help push us forward. But Candorful is a great one. It's available to anybody, not just in the military community. And I'm a little bit more on leaning on towards the military side, because I have most of the resources I took advantage of were military related, or available to the military community. I would say that Hire Heroes, again, if you're in the military community, they offer to work on kind of redo your resume a little bit. I would say that their resource of connecting you to a mentor is fantastic, because that's how I met this one mentor, and he was a recruiter for the tech space, but he was very familiar with Salesforce, and he really stood out to me, and I kept going back to him because he gave me really tangible advice of what to do. I feel like sometimes some people kind of give you really general advice, and it can be really hard to take action on those types of advice. But he really listened to my story. He really listened to what my needs were, and he did a really good job of addressing it. So I don't know if I just got lucky, but I've heard other people who've had success with that as well.
Cool.
Oh, and when you're studying for exams, focusonforce.com is great. I've just got my 3rd certification, and it was thanks to Focus on Force. So Focus on Force helped me get my admin cert and my platform app builder cert. So, and they're very affordable. So I highly recommend that as a resource for exam prep.
2 or 3 advice you would give. What 3 advice would you give to someone who wants to get their first Salesforce job?
So first, stop submitting online job applications. When you stop doing it, it really kind of lovingly forces you to rethink how you approach job hunting, right? And looking for a job. It'll push you to talk to more people, to ask for those informational interviews, cold message people. Earlier I mentioned how I got my job, right? It wasn't through a close friend. It was through someone I met one time at an event. And that is what we call like a weak tie, right? So people within your network, they're your strong relationships, your strong ties. But the thing is, if that was enough, everyone would be employed, right? If your network alone was enough, you could just tell your network, I'm looking for a job, and poof, you'd have a job. But it isn't enough. And there's actually research shows that the people, you have more success with finding a job through a weak tie, which is someone that's an acquaintance you might have met once or twice. You're more likely to find a job through a weak tie because they connect you to somebody outside of your network. So the more weak ties you have, the more networks you have access to. And that's essentially what happened to me. And when I shared this concept with other people, they were like, actually, yeah, that's how I found my job too. It was like, because someone who knew someone else was the one who like recommended me for the job. So stop applying for online job applications. You're just going to drive yourself crazy. And I honestly think that LinkedIn is going to replace resumes and job applications one day. So yeah, just stop doing that. Stop torturing yourself. Number 2, work on your personal brand. Again, there's thousands of people out there trying to do the same exact thing as you. How are you going to stand out? People are not drawn to resumes. People are not drawn to like skills or even awards. People are drawn to other people who share the same values. And for me, since I knew what my purpose was, I knew what my values were, I was able to narrow down the kind of people and the kind of companies I wanted to talk to, which leads me to my 3rd advice, which is make sure you know what you're actually looking for, because the Salesforce ecosystem is vast. Right? There's sales and marketing and education and nonprofit and finance and health, and there's so many options. And sometimes we think that if we get specific, we're going to lose out on opportunities. But it's really the opposite. Is that if you're casting a really wide net, then it seems like there isn't a focus anymore. And when you're interviewing, or when you go to a recruiter and they're asking you, what are you looking for? And you say, oh, anything, like I just need a job. No one's going to take you seriously. And so make sure you take the time to figure out, like, what is your brand? What are your values? What kind of job do you work for? Who do you want to work for? Or maybe you want to work for yourself. You want to start your own consulting company, and you want to talk to somebody who might have started their own. Like, that's very popular these days. So figure out what those non-negotiables are for you, and then go after it with everything that you've got.
This is amazing advice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your time, for your information. This was just so much information, actionable information that people can take. No water, just information, useful information. Thank you so much, Susan, for your time.